Hello and welcome to lesson 6.1, solving one-step linear inequalities for Algebra 1. Couple notes to begin with before we start with this lesson though, saying that this is the first one of our virtual term for this class. With these video lessons, my advice is to obviously take copies of your own notes. If you don't have a printer at home, to print off the blank notes packet that I'll post in Google Classroom. Then please just follow along in your math notebook, create your own notes document like we did at the beginning of the year or on a separate sheet of paper. But remember, writing down information has been proven to help you better understand and remember it. Also, with these videos, I'm not going to cover everything as in detail as we would in the classroom, obviously, without you there to ask questions, but I'll do my best to go into details and cover all the major topics. You also do have your book as a resource if you need to look at any of the additional examples or pieces of information in the lesson. You may want to pause the video, go back, redo parts of the lesson, rewatch parts. Obviously, you're more than welcome to do so. That's the purpose of this video. And again, make sure you use all your resources, reach out for help while you're doing the practice problems if you didn't understand something in this lesson. Also, bear with me with the side of technology. I may have to flip screens partway through this lesson over to the document camera for some examples or additional work. Just deal with it, pause if need be, and again, we're all learning as we transition into this virtual term. So, starting with inequalities. Remember, inequalities are anything that is not an equal sign, meaning it could be something like less than or greater than, or less than or equal to, or greater than or equal to. Now, this open circle, closed circle piece we will discuss in just a second here. That's what you need for graphing these on a number line. But again, inequalities, anything that is not an equal sign. So the way that we graph these would be on a number line, which we'll come back to for the open or closed circle piece. But I do want to go over a quick refresher on how we solve inequalities or just equations with variables in one or more steps. So if we have any equation, such as 12 equals 2x plus 2. So if I have 12 equals 2x plus 2, remember my advice is to draw a segment down through your equal sign, separate the problem, and again, think about working the order of operations backward to isolate your variable. So we may want to think of something like SADMEP instead of PEMDAS. So what you want to think to yourself is, again, how do we get rid of whatever's on the same side of the variable so it's on its own? So in this case, instead of adding 2, we would need to subtract 2 from each side of the equation. So 12 minus 2 would equal 10. And what's left on the right-hand side is 2x. The whole purpose is so that the positive and negative 2 there cancel out. Then to undo multiplication, we would want to divide each side by 2, meaning x would equal 5. So if we have an equal sign, we use order of operations backward, and we want to isolate the variable. As we work with inequalities, nothing about that process changes other than your symbol. So, for example, if I had a problem like y divided by 2 plus 3 is less than or equal to, let's say, 8. So in this case, you still could draw your segment down through the inequality, and we want to go through the process to isolate the variable. So again, order of operations backward. Instead of addition of 3, we want to get that back to 0. So we would subtract 3 on each side. On the left, we are then left with y divided by 2 is less than or equal to 5. Then we want to undo the division of 2, so we'd multiply each side by 2, and in that case, y is less than or equal to 10. So just a quick refresher on the algebra on how to solve for a variable, whether it's an equation or an inequality. So going back over to today's notes. All right, so the open circle, closed circle, I'll cover in the later examples, but that refers to what you do for the symbol when placing these on a number line. So a rule says, if you multiply or divide by a negative, then you flip the inequality sign. And that is the one piece you want to remember when you are solving these. So what they mean by that is if we're solving an inequality, such as negative 4x is less than 20. If I need to solve this, I'd have to divide each side by a negative 4. That causes my inequality symbol to flip from less than to greater than, and x would then be greater than negative 5. So if we're multiplying or dividing by a negative when we're solving for the variable, you have to flip the inequality. All right, so looking at a couple examples here. Again, you want to just solve for the variable, same way as if it were an equation, just keep track of your inequality symbols. Now, I apologize, my example A here was slightly different than yours, so please change that on your sheet, if you do have a copy, to x plus 5 is less than or equal to 3. Then we want to get x alone, so we'd subtract 5 from each side. 3 minus 5 is a negative 2, so x is less than or equal to a negative 2. The or equal part tells me I need to use a closed circle. So for graphing these on a number line, you go to whatever the value is, and you would place either your open or closed circle. So in this case, closed circle at negative 2. Then we need to decide which way to draw the arrow for greater than or less than. In this case, x is any value less than or equal to negative 2, so that would be anything to the left along the number line. So if we look at b here, we have a negative 2 is greater than n minus 4. So we want to get n alone, the opposite of subtracting 4. We have to add 4 to each side. And in that case, 2 is greater than n, or n is less than 2. Now in this case, I apologize because I actually drew my arrow going the wrong way. So it would be an open circle, but because 2 is greater than n, that means n is less than 2. So for that example, if we flip screens here, in that case, if 2 was greater than n, that's the same thing as n is less than 2. So in that case, if I were to put this on a number line, and if here's 0, roughly here's 2, over here are my negatives, then n would be anything less than, so going to the left, anything less than 2. All right. So for C, we have a divided by 3 is less than or equal to 12. Need to multiply both sides by 3. In this case, a is less than or equal to 36, meaning closed circle because of the or equal to. So filled in circle at 36. Less than is to the left, so our arrow would be going left. In D, a negative 4.2 times m is less than 6.3. So in this case, what we would need to do is we would need to divide each side by a negative 4.2. Dividing by a negative tells me I have to flip my inequality. So in this case, m is greater than 1.5. So for the number line, because it's just greater than, you need an open circle. Anything greater than would be to the right, so our arrow goes to the right. And our last few examples here. With E, again, I notice the negative right away, so I'm going to need to flip my variable. So, or not my variable, sorry, my inequality. So I'll multiply each side by a negative 5. That causes this to become n is greater than negative 55. Open circle, greater than is to the right, so our arrow goes to the right. In F, 15x is greater than or equal to 45. So we need to divide each side by 15, and 1x is greater than or equal to 3. The or equal to means it's a filled in circle. Greater than would be to the right, so our arrow goes to the right. Then the last two examples. X plus 11 is greater or less than or equal to 7. Subtract our 11 from each side, and it should be less than or equal to a negative 4. So my apologies there. That should be filled in as or equal to, meaning that piece here should be a filled in circle. So in this case, that circle should be filled in, not open, and we should have that part underlined. And then the last piece here, we have a negative 1.8 times n is less than negative 4.5. So in that case, we'll have to flip the inequality, and n is greater than 2.5. So open circle because it's just greater than, and going to the right. So the practice problems for today's assignment, we're actually breaking into two different parts. Those will be posted in Google Classroom separately. So just look in Google Classroom for directions on completing and submitting the assignments and which problems go with which parts. As always, please let me know if you have any questions as you are working on the practice problems. And again, go back, rewatch this video if need be to complete your notes and understanding.